And good morning, everybody. If it looks like I'm in mourning, it's because I am. I am mourning the, I guess, demise, maybe temporary demise, hopefully temporary, but as of now, permanent demise of New York City. So that's not really the topic of today, but I am mourning New York City. We have a new mayor, Eric Adams. He can only be better than de Blasio, who was a joke of a person and the worst mayor in New York City history. And the damage to the city is possibly irreversible. So that's why I'm dressed the way I am. I'm in mourning today, even though it's day 3 of the new administration, just because I don't see the radically unfree, apparently unconstitutional, stupid, venal, and clownish vaccine mandates disappearing. Very recently, there was a video of the police telling a 5-year-old kid who he didn't have his paperwork that they all had to leave and he just wanted to have a burger and sit with his family, and he was crying, and they were making them leave, and this little boy crying. And if that's New York City and blue state America, I don't want to be a part of it. So that's the mourning part of it. In not the very distant past, it would have been unthinkable for that to happen, particularly in a place like New York City, where we used to have an honorable left and honorable liberals who would have pushed back against something so repellent as the situation I just described. But those people are either gone or scared or both, because they've been told by corporate media, particularly the New Yorker, New York Times, CNN, CBS, and MSNBC, that all things fall and all things are irrelevant before the multinational corporation vaccine agenda. So you have 8 or 9 new vaccine big pharma billionaires. You have a Pfizer balance sheet that is exploding with cash. And in the old days, this would have sent particularly New York City liberals into fits, justifiably, and they would have been right, that that entity, being big pharma, Pfizer, Moderna, the rest of them, Johnson and Johnson, that those are not entities to follow. And if the government would have been following them, they would have gone off the rails in fury. That was how it used to be here, which is why somebody like myself, a nominally Christian, nationalist, libertarian, somewhat conservative type, could live here, because it was more than palatable. It was viable because the actual left, other than their economics, is a fantastic group of people. But they seem to be asleep at the switch, and they've been infected with the SARS remix virus. So I don't know what else to say. So I'm going to see how this goes in the next 10 to 11 months and adjust myself accordingly. So that's my morning New York City pose today. Secondly, and shortly, just want to talk a little bit about what Jason Whitlock and TJ Moe were talking about on Whitlock's podcast. His YouTube channel, Fearless, is very, very good. I recommend it. And he and TJ Moe, who was a star receiver at Missouri and then played briefly on the practice squad with the Patriots, they were talking about the NFL and Tom Brady. Whitlock's point today was Antonio Brown and Brady are different kind of cowards. And they kept talking about something that, in general, I agree with. Brown is not well. He seems to have emotional and psychological issues that need to be attended to. And then Whitlock, he his theory is that somebody like Tom Brady is a coward because he's looking only out for the Tom Brady brand, and like the NFL is looking out only for the almighty dollar. And I find this, especially from somebody like Jason Whitlock, whose work is highly recommended by me. But I just found it strange, and I need to talk about the fact that this insufferable, naive idea that it's all about the dollar with the NFL and somebody like Tom Brady, that what they don't seem to understand is that to the people who are steering the ship on this, on what Whitlock correctly describes as the satanic destruction of the United States, these formerly free United States, they're not worried about the money. They have access to the Federal Reserve. They can print money. They've got friends that can, quote unquote, loan them money. I mean, the money to them is irrelevant. It is not about the money. It's about the narrative. It's about the agenda. Whitlock seems unable to connect his correctly arrived at premise of the satanic, and he uses that word intentionally, and I agree with him, evil destruction of a free and competent and intelligent United States. I think he's right about that. And which is why it's weird to me that he doesn't seem to understand that with these people, it isn't about the money at all. It is about the destruction. It is about the narrative. So it's the narrative that they will bend the knee for and toward for anything. The money is not the issue. Now, Brady is a little bit of a different situation because he's an individual, and yes, he's going to make sure his quote unquote brand is right. But that's different than the NFL and the NBA and to a degree Major League Baseball and hockey being manipulated and taken over and converged with social justice warrior woke. You can call it satanic, you can call it conspiracy theory, you can call it Luciferian, you can call it Promethean. It doesn't matter what you call it, but when you have NFL helmets saying end racism in the back, when the NFL is, 75% black, and has been, especially with Marion Motley joining the Browns in 1946, a year before Jackie Robinson, one of the least racist entities in American history, you really have to try to wonder what is going on. You have to wonder what they're trying to do. And it doesn't take much intellectual firepower to see that they're trying to destroy any masculine, free, independent, you can combine or separate all three of those institutions that are out there. And that's the narrative strength. A quick aside on the power of the narrative. We're seeing nuclear energy, which was and seen as nuclear energy is wonderful, carbon-free, and spectacular. The narrative behind nuclear has now changed, and that's all it's going to take for nuclear energy to be accepted, right? So the power of the narrative is stronger than the power of the dollar, right? Think about Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, Fukushima, all this kind of stuff. Oh, nuclear energy is bad. There's still people frothing at the mouth screaming about nuclear energy not being a plus. But the power elite, the same people who control and are trying to control our lives, now nuclear energy is viable. They just changed the narrative. There are serfs and toads in the corporate media. They just got to put that out there, and all the anti-nuclear stuff will be gone. So that's how strong the narrative. The narrative matters more than the dollar, and that's where I found this dollar serfdom that Whitlock talks about, and TJ Moe to a certain degree, regarding somebody like Tom Brady or the NFL to be naive, which is odd for somebody like me, a small fish, to point that out. Lastly, I think Whitlock is right talking about the jabs, the Yamin, as Canon Hotep and the Hoteps talk about they're calling it the vacation now because you're going to have your channel banned if you say certain words, but the Yamin, the vacation, the stabby, whatever you want to call it. Whitlock is right about LeBron James and particularly about Tom Brady. No way in the world. And let's leave LeBron James out of it because, although I think this is true of him too, but Tom Brady is one of these guys. Every molecule of substance that goes into his body, from lotion to what he cleans his hair with to certainly what he eats, is monitored and analyzed. Tom Brady is 44 years old. He's still arguably the top quarterback in the NFL. He's certainly top three. Of that, there's no debate. He's so careful about what he ingests. There's no way in the world that an experimental gene therapy, mRNA, rushed to market guinea pig substance, that he's going to allow that in a needle to be put into his system. No way in the world. It is simply not the case. But he's going along with the narrative. And this is why I had to talk about the Whitlock TJ Moe discussion that's going on now, which is very good. And you should shut this off immediately and listen to that, because it's probably better. But there is no way that an athlete like Tom Brady, at the top of his game, going to be seen as one of the top 10 athletes in the history of professional sports, all the sports, allowed that stuff to be put in his body. You can't convince me. There's nothing you could say, if you know anything about Tom Brady and the way he operates, that substance, that experimental gene therapy, spike protein juice, Yamin vacation, Fauci medical kit for Bug 19 was allowed in his system. Yet, and this is where Whitlock is right, he doesn't say anything. Aaron Rodgers has spoken up. Lamar Jackson has spoken up. Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets hasn't played a game yet. That's brave. They are going up against the narrative, which is stronger than the dollar. All of those people are millionaires. They're set for life. They don't have to worry about money, particularly Tom Brady and particularly Kyrie Irving. And they're speaking up and they're doing something about it. Not Tom Brady. And that's where Whitlock is right. Tom Brady needs to speak up. And Tom Brady, if you're listening to this, you should say, I'm not vaxxed. I'm never going to be vaxxed. I'm not putting that mess into my system and risking myself for some experimental, big pharma, multi-billion-dollar, multinational corporation conglomerate that is one of the heads of globalist capitalism. It would be that easy. And then he's got FU money, and he can just stiff arm anybody who comes at him. What are they going to do? Bench Tom Brady? Really? They're going to take his job? Are they going to cancel Tom Brady and his supermodel wife? How? So, especially Brady, what's he got? Is he going to play another year? I don't know. It would not be difficult, and it would not be risky, and it would be brave for Tom Brady to speak up. So, Tom Brady, if you're listening to this, just say it. Look, I say it all the time. I'm not putting something like that in my system. I'm a public school teacher in the broken down neighborhood, 25 difficult years under his belt, mourning New York City, and I can say it. That means, Tom Brady, you can say it too. Go for it, buddy.